think we're fine. I think we're ready to begin, and I thank you all for being patient. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hi, here I am. I'm glad you know how somebody sits at the desk now and they only wear their shirt and they have on their pajama bottoms? Well, now you know that I have a whole suit on, okay? I just want to let you all know that. All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. My name is Janet Smitelli, and this is our February meeting. And we have a very special meeting tonight. And our main speaker will be a Michael Cutler, and he will tell you all about himself. And he is going to be speaking on on immigration issues and what Biden's issues and what his proposal is going to do to America. Before we begin, though, I'd like to just go over some housekeeping. And one of the most exciting things we have tonight going on is we have a virtual cake for someone who is having a very special birthday. This someone is one of our founding fathers of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. His name is Joe Caruso. I don't think I have to go any further. Any of you who know Ronald Reagan Republican Club know Joe Caruso because he has been the backbone of this club for a long time. Now, Joe, we're not giving you a cake. We're giving you a virtual cake. We are going to be enjoying the cake, but we are giving you a virtual cake, and everyone will be cheering you tonight, and everyone can have some of our virtual cake. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to move over. And how what you have done for us and for the party over the past many years and decades has been so important and has been essential to us and to our loved ones. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Joe. Happy birthday to you.
Hooray!
Whoa. Yay. Awesome.
Okay. Now I have a couple more administrative things to discuss with you, and then I can turn the meeting over to our speaker. The first thing is tonight and last week and next week, Tom McNally, who would have loved to have been here to say a quick hello to everyone, who, as you know, is our new Huntington Republican chairperson, had contracted COVID and has recovered and is now resuming with the vetting of candidates for this year. And so far, I can't reveal anything, but so far it sounds very exciting, and I can't wait to get this started, and I can't wait to put forward, for all of us to join together and put forward a very strong presence this year and to help our candidates to victory. Okay, also, we have our very own Gene Cook, who could not be with us tonight, may be able to stop by later, I'm not sure, but he has asked us to invite everyone to the Oheka Castle, again virtually, on February 18th from 6 to 8. And you can just contact him or Joanne, his trusty assistant, and sign up for this virtual meeting where he has a very big announcement to advise us of. Also, the Suffolk County Republican Committee has some fundraisers going on this month. The next one is the 16th of February, and it's at the Piermont in Babylon. And the one that I'm going to, as well as a bunch of Huntington people so far that I've heard, Cafe Havana in Smithtown on the 22nd of February. So please, support the committee, support your local candidates once they are decided, and support us and support our cause. So now, without further ado, I would like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Cutler, who is going to be speaking to us again on immigration issues, and I thank you all for joining us. Okay, Hector, take it away.
I just unmuted myself.
Myself
One
first.
second, 1 second.
I apologize, Mr. Cutler. So we are proud to introduce Mr. Cutler. And now, Mr. Cutler, you have the floor. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege. And you have Tommy Triola to blame for this. Tom is an old friend of mine. We go back forever to our days at JFK, and then we became agents together. I hate to admit this, but you can look at our white gray hair back in the 70s. I started my career in 1971 at John F. Kennedy International Airport as an immigration inspector. When I helped Arizona with SB 1070, I provided them with a deposition, and I described that 4-year stint when I was an inspector at Kennedy Airport as the time that I had my eye to the peephole on America's front door. During that 4-year period, I spent a year doing the marriage interviews like you've seen in the movies. We actually uncovered a marriage fraud ring involving Chinese seamen who married Puerto Rican lesbian hookers. I kid you not, but only in New York. And that became my introduction to immigration fraud. And then in 1975, I became an immigration, we used to be called criminal investigators. Now the job is called a special agent. No difference in the job, just the title and the badge that went with it. And in my first year, and this is really important because there is no such thing as a routine investigation. When you hear Joe Biden say, well, we're going to go after the aliens who pose a threat to national security, but we're not going to bother those that commit quote unquote minor crimes and so forth, it's one of the biggest lies you will ever be told. His nose should immediately stretch out into infinity. There's no such thing as a minor investigation. As a brand new agent, you're not entrusted with major cases. You're first getting your feet wet. So we had an Israeli young man, 2 years younger than me, and I at the time was about 26, 27 years old. He was about 24, 25, came into Kennedy Airport with an altered visa. It was originally issued for one entry. He had already entered the United States and departed, changed the number 1 to the number 2, and changed the year of expiration so that he could come in without getting a new visa. Of course, that's a crime, but we didn't prosecute it. And immigration law, by the way, so you understand, has 2 elements: criminal immigration law versus administrative immigration law. From a criminal side, it's like any other crime. You commit a felony, we're going to prosecute you, we're going to seek a conviction, and then the imposition of a punishment. Maybe it's a jail sentence, maybe it's a fine, maybe it's both. Administratively, the remedy is to strip the alien of any status they may have acquired and then seek their removal or deportation from the United States. So in this case, most of those cases are resolved administratively, seek to deport them, except now under Biden, that's not going to happen either, apparently, which scares the hell out of me. But this young man, when I went to interview him, easy to talk to, spoke fluent English, everything was great, except he was from the West Bank of Israel and kept calling Israel Palestine, which made the hair on my neck stand up. When I asked him about military service, he claimed he didn't understand what I was talking about. I brought in a translator. She asked him the questions in Hebrew. We were doing great until we got to the question about military service. So when he couldn't understand Hebrew, she flipped to Arabic, and he absolutely locked up the wheels, said, I'm not answering any more questions. So I did something unconventional, which is what I did for most of my career. I called the Israeli consulate. With great reluctance, the consul general came down with 2 of his staffers who turned out to be involved with the Mossad, but I didn't know that at the time. They started to interview him. He's one of their citizens. And as they were interviewing him, I noticed that his shirt did not fit properly. Now, back then, they didn't wear the orange jumpsuits. They wore their street clothing that they were arrested in. So the shirt that he was wearing was the shirt he came to the airport in. And I noticed it wasn't fitting properly. I guess I wasn't paying attention to it when I was questioning him. Again, I was a brand new agent. I had him take the shirt off, and with great reluctance he did. And then I understood why he didn't want to take it off and why the shirt didn't fit properly. Inside the shirt was a pocket hidden in the shirt. In the pocket was a piece of paper with a diagram in Arabic writing. I handed it over to the Israelis, who said there was no reason for me to waste their time, but they came just to humor me. Well, let me tell you, that schematic was a schematic of their oil refinery. It was a plan to blow it up. Picture that. My goosebumps had goosebumps. I got on the phone with my boss. He got on the phone with the FBI. The Israelis grabbed the phone, called back to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. They opened up an investigation, and I was pleased that I was able to stay on the case. It was getting a Hanukkah present you couldn't imagine. Over time, the guy became a cooperator. The Israelis were able to arrest 6 would-be terrorists about a week before they had planned to attack the refinery. The guy that we arrested at the airport was here to get additional money to buy additional weapons and explosives. There's no such thing as a routine investigation. And we don't know who the bad guys are most of the time. When you hear the term sleeper agent, what they're really telling you is this is somebody who, not unlike a spy, is doing everything possible to keep a low profile. James Bond is in the movies, not in the real world. In the real world, a spy does not drive an Aston Martin, and a spy does not wear $5,000 Armani suits and have a $10,000 Rolex watch. They probably wear jeans and sneakers, and if they wear a suit, they bought it off the rack in a department store somewhere. They keep a low profile. Somebody once said that a spy is somebody who would not attract the attention of a waiter or waitress at a greasy spoon diner, might even be that waiter or waitress. I've been involved with other terrorism investigations. Eventually, I rotated through all the squads within the investigations branch. In 1988, I became the first immigration agent assigned to the Unified Intelligence Division of the DEA in New York City. In 1991, I was promoted to the position of senior special agent, and I was assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. And I did my very first congressional hearing on May 20th, 1997. The issue was immigration fraud and visa fraud because of the 93 attacks. First, the shooting at the CIA by an individual named Kansi, a Pakistani, who had applied for asylum, showed up at the CIA with his delivery truck he bought into a courier service. The truck had a permit that allowed him to park in the parking lot of the CIA. He shows up in January 93 with an AK-47, jumps out, opens fire, kills 2 CIA officers, wounds 3 others, and flees the country. Criminal aliens and foreign terrorists have an escape hatch they can escape through. The following month, we had the bombing at the Trade Center, 6 dead, over 1,000 injured, $500 million in damages, and the tower almost collapsed. Had that happened, it's estimated that hundreds of thousands could have died. And the Clinton administration did nothing to meaningfully address this issue of immigration fraud. And in fact, it was in 97, when I was at that hearing, that the focus had shifted to fraud. At that same time, the Clinton administration was running a program called Citizenship USA, CUSA, where their goal was to naturalize as many immigrants as possible. They took every shortcut unimaginable. The law says you're supposed to do good moral character investigations on aliens who seek citizenship. So it's not enough that you don't have a criminal conviction. If some guy doesn't have a criminal conviction, but a number of his neighbors say, well, he's not really a nice guy. When he comes home on payday, he usually gets drunk, stops at the local brothel, and when his wife complains, he's been known to smack her around, but she doesn't want to go to the police because of the children. That guy does not get citizenship. Well, under CUSA, we had naturalized thousands of aliens before their fingerprints even came back. The employees of immigration, back then it was the INS, complained to the Office of Inspector General. They did an investigation, and we found thousands of aliens who had been granted US citizenship who should have been deported. Think about that. Now, by the way, and Tom helped me tremendously, we could not get aliens prosecuted for reentry after deportation back in the 80s because it was only a 2-year maximum jail sentence. We went to Al D'Amato. I convinced D'Amato that we need to distinguish criminal aliens from those who are not criminals per se. And so the penalty for criminals who get deported and come back became 20 years in jail maximum. Most were getting between 3 and 5 years. I made the first arrest in New York of a Dominican drug dealer who lost his residency because of drug convictions and weapons convictions. Last year, under President Trump, that specific crime was the most frequently prosecuted felony pursued by the Justice Department. That's probably going to go out the window also. The purpose for that law is to deter people who get deported from coming back and hurting more people. You would think it's a simple concept. I mean, you go to a bar, they have bouncers. You go to the House of Representatives, they have a sergeant at arms. Doesn't America deserve the same? And by the way, when I was on Fox and Friends last year, I like to use analogies. I asked rhetorically if the host of the program would be willing to get on an airplane if they saw people sneaking past TSA. And the young lady let out a squeal, looked at me and said, of course not. I said, then why in the world are we being forced to live among millions of aliens who have no inherent right to be here, who evaded the very same sort of vetting process that we conduct at ports of entry? They were stunned. When I walked off the set, the whole crew ran over to me and gave me a high five. And they said, wow, I never thought of it that way. A couple of months ago, I had the privilege of addressing a room filled with Air Force generals and colonels. I work with the Speakers Bureau, been working with them for over a decade. They do seminars for the military and the intelligence services. And again, I called in an analogy, and I didn't get a single dissenting voice. The shared common mission of all of our branches of the armed forces is to keep the enemies of America as far from our shores as possible. Up close and in person, guess who gets that mission? The Border Patrol and the agents of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's how critically important immigration law enforcement is. People like to say, oh, it's only immigration. Immigration is not a single issue, but a singular issue. It impacts everything. It impacts criminal justice. It impacts national security. It impacts public safety, public health, education, the economy, critical infrastructure. You name it, it's slammed when we refuse to secure the borders. I'm going to ask you a question. I want this to rattle around for a little bit. I'll get the answer to you. Maybe you'll figure it out yourself. But while I'm speaking, if we can multitask, simple question, yes or no, is the immigration system broken? Just want you to chew on that while I continue on with my presentation for you. Is the immigration system broken? So now understand that for years we've had a problem with immigration. There are lots of people who love the idea of cheap labor. And it started out kind of innocently. Oh, they wash dishes, the illegals will mow our lawns, they do the work Americans really don't want to do. Over time, they got more aggressive. This is kind of like the frog in boiling water. You know that story. You drop a frog in hot water, the frog jumps out and runs for his life. You put the frog in ice cold water and raise the heat gradually, pretty soon you have frog stew. So it started with the jobs Americans won't do. Then it became, well, the jobs that maybe we don't feel like, we're not so trained. And then it progressed to, you know what? For America to lead, we need to bring in the world's best and brightest. How many times have you heard that? We've heard it from Republican and Democrat alike. When I confronted Ted Cruz about it, because we both spoke at a rally, I said to him, you know, this business about bringing in the world's best and brightest, I said, you know, I'm from Brooklyn, and where I come from, we have a name for the world's best and brightest, and we call them Americans. Ted Cruz got so upset, he actually pushed me, and it almost got ugly. What are we doing? Think about that. I'm old enough to remember when Sputnik was launched. I was always a big fan of the space program. My original dream was to become an aerospace engineer. I did a little single engine flying when I was a kid out at Zons Airport, across the road from Republic. I was going to be an engineer. Well, I never became an engineer, but two of my kids did. By the way, one of my two sons who's an engineer, we have four amazing children and grandchildren. I can't tell you how proud I am of all of them. My youngest son right now is on assignment out of state working as a mechanical engineer, and he's only 24 years old. He's a valuable member of the team that's assembling the new subway cars over at Kawasaki. He has autism. We didn't know that he would be able to live independently when he was a child. Early intervention and the incredible therapists and teachers made all the difference. I call him my mountain climber. Nothing stops him. He graduated from City College with honors. This kid that we didn't think could live independently. Today, money for early intervention is being moved from those important programs to help American children and being put into English as a second language. I want to know why compassion never applies to American children. That's another question you may just want to ponder in your spare time, if you have such a thing, your spare time. By the way, the second largest contingent of law enforcement officers who are assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force are immigration agents, because every foreign national who comes to the United States to carry out an attack violates multiple sections of the immigration laws. On September 11, 2001, America was attacked. Within 2 days, I got phone calls from Congress and from people in Washington. They wanted me to come down because they knew I had worked on a number of terrorist investigations. The irony is that prior to 9/11, I had a screaming match with the Republican counsel to the House Judiciary Committee. And I finally, out of frustration, said to him, what the F is it going to take? Another attack at the World Trade Center? We had that argument on the Friday before 9/11.
Wow. Hey,
Think
Mr.
about
Cutler, I'm sorry to interrupt. Some people have questions for you, so whenever you want to take the questions, just let me know.
I just want to get into Biden because what I want to do is lay the groundwork so you understand the magnitude of impact that immigration has on America and Americans. What we have with Joe Biden is a guy who wants to legalize what he says are 11 million illegal aliens. I just want you to think about that one issue, because that issue could end America, and that's not hyperbole. You may think I'm crazy, but if we have a massive amnesty program for 11 million illegal aliens, first of all, that number is ridiculous. The Reagan amnesty was supposed to involve 1 million. It wound up involving almost 4 million, but that number isn't accurate either. Here's the big secret. We're being lied to about these numbers. This is a numbers game. Because what nobody talks about is that once an alien gets lawful status, and I agree with the principle and the law, by the way, they are entitled to bring in every single one of all of their minor children. So if you have a guy who's been partying and having kids everywhere, and he has 15 kids, all 15 can come to the United States as resident aliens. They can bring their spouses. Yale University did a study 2 years ago, and they projected that the real number of illegals in the country, not 11 million, that number's been static for the last 15 years. They think it's 22.1 million. I think that's a low number because you have many aliens who get arrested. They lie about their citizenship so that we don't deport them. Think about that. So the number will probably be closer to 30, maybe 40, we don't know. And aliens can run the border and claim they've been here forever when they got here last Thursday. There will be no capacity to interview any of them. There will be no capacity to do field investigations. The 9/11 Commission was abundantly clear about the nexus between immigration and terrorism. I just want to read two quick things to you about that. But what I want you to understand as I'm looking for this, and this is really something very, very important. If there's, let's say, and I'm being a wild-eyed optimist, 25 million illegal aliens, and when you look at the Yale estimate, I'm not going out on much of a limb, it could be 30 or more. If each alien on average has just 4 children, do you know how many people they would bring to the United States? 100 million. I want that number to sink in. 100 million. They need more than a pillow to sleep on. They will all need food and water and sewerage, access to medical care, electricity. Inflation will go through the roof, congestion, forget about it. And think what that would do to our educational system, because if they're under the age of 16 by law, they must be enrolled in our schools. The Congressional Budget Office did a study back in 2006 that found that it costs 20 to 40% more to educate children who are not English proficient. Where will we deal with these 100 million students? And as they get older, guess what? They're going to become part of the labor pool. So when Biden says we're going to create these great jobs as he ends the pipeline, as he ends border wall construction, where are we going to put these folks to work? And increasingly, jobs today are going away from manual labor and heading more towards high-tech work. President Trump put a screeching halt to much of the H-1B visa program. By the way, you should know that Alan Greenspan testified for Chuck Schumer, another hero. I had a major fight with Chuck back when he was my congressman, but never my representative, let's be clear. What Greenspan said back in 2009 was that the solution to wage inequality is to make American high-tech workers compete with foreign workers to cut their wage premium. So if we could lower the wage of high-tech workers through the competition with foreign workers, we could greatly reduce inequality in wages between Americans with skills and those with lesser skills. He actually had the chutzpah to refer to high-tech Americans as the privileged elite while he lives in a mansion in the Hamptons. I just stop and think about that. By the way, this also leads to a lot of our technology leaving the country, benefiting China. President Trump took all of those issues on. Biden is reversing every single one of those vital measures that protect national security. So while we're not having enough bedrooms in hospitals for Americans and enough vaccine, Biden has unleashed a really a human tsunami. But there's just a couple of quotes I want to give you, and then I'm happy to take all the questions you have. Immigration is just such a complex issue. You could discuss it for an hour a week for the next 3 years and not cover everything. So I'm just trying to give you a quick overview. By the way, you should know I began investigating MS-13 way back in 1991, 92. And what hammered us the worst was Obama's unaccompanied minor program. And guess what? It's up and running once again, isn't it? The 9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel is an official government report. The preface begins with this paragraph. It is perhaps obvious to state that terrorists cannot plan and carry out attacks in the United States if they are unable to enter the country. Yet prior to September 11, while there were efforts to enhance border security, no agency of the US government thought of border security as a tool in the counterterrorism arsenal. Indeed, even after 19 hijackers demonstrated the relative ease of obtaining a US visa and gaining admission into the United States, border security still is not considered a cornerstone of national security policy. We believe, for reasons we discuss in the following pages, that it must be made one. For the record, on 9/11, 26 countries participated in the visa waiver program. George W. Bush inexplicably did not end that program, but expanded it. So did Mr. Obama. And President Trump made Poland number 39 on the hit parade. The number should be 0, okay? Now, as far as giving benefits to aliens who are here illegally, fast 2 paragraphs. Once terrorists had entered the United States, the next challenge was to find a way to remain here. Their primary method was immigration fraud. For example, Yusuf and Ajaj concocted bogus political asylum stories when they arrived in the United States. Mahmoud Abu Alima, involved in both the World Trade Center and landmark plots, received temporary residence under the seasonal agriculture worker program after falsely claiming that he picked beans in Florida. Mohammed Saleh, who rented the truck used in the bombing, overstayed his tourist visa. He then applied for permanent residency under the agriculture worker program, but was rejected. Iyad Mahmoud Ismail, who drove the van containing the bomb, took English language classes at Wichita State University in Kansas on a student visa. After he dropped out, he remained in the United States out of status. Now, here's the takeaway. New York State and other states are giving illegal aliens driver's licenses. New York State won't even share that information with the Department of Homeland Security. Think about that. They're not using airplanes, they're using motor vehicles. Think of all those concrete fortifications to block truck and car bombs. Meanwhile, across the country, states like New York, California, Illinois, and others are giving illegal aliens driver's licenses so they can go anywhere in the United States, rent a truck, and carry out an attack. How brilliant. How brilliant. But we've lost almost all of our expectations of privacy in the name of national security. Now, here's one more paragraph, and then I have one more thing to read to you. Terrorists in the 1990s, as well as the September 11th hijackers, needed to find a way to stay in or embed themselves in the United States if their operational plans were to come to fruition. As already discussed, this could be accomplished legally by marrying an American citizen, achieving temporary worker status, which is what DACA is. By the way, what's the age cutoff for DACA? You might be shocked to know that by now we're talking about people who are close to their 40s, because they had to claim back in 2013 that they came before they were 16. Guess how long the interviews were? 0. There were no interviews. What prevents an alien from saying, oh, I came here 10 years ago, when in reality they got here last week? Nothing prevents it. And Biden has now said his official policy will be to not prosecute anybody who lies on any application for an immigration benefit. If I can't sleep at night, as I told Chairman Sensenbrenner, then I don't want you to sleep at night. But it gets worse. Achieving temporary worker status or applying for asylum after entering. When you flood the asylum backlog with all those people, there's no ability to deal with the applications. Alejandro Mayorkas, who was selected to be the Secretary of Homeland Security and was just confirmed, worked for Obama and was investigated by the Office of Inspector General for approving applications for treaty investor visas, EB-5 visas, that were involved with Terry McAuliffe and the Clintons. There was no justification for approving the visas. He also ordered his people to get to yes. In other words, you better approve those applications or else. And with one of the women in a high-ranking position within Citizenship and Immigration Services refused to approve applications that clearly should never have been approved, He demoted her, told her to work from home, and this was before COVID, and brought somebody in who would rubber stamp those applications. I want you to think about it. By the way, the Clinton program of CUSA, they ultimately approved 1.1 million applications for citizenship. You should know that when our troops raided the bin Laden compound, 2 items stuck out on the inventory list, to my eyes. They had a copy of the 9/11 Commission report, and I think I mentioned I gave testimony to the commission. He also had an application for US citizenship. A whole bunch of people have come to America, gotten citizenship, and then went back to the Middle East with those 2 passports because they can retain their original citizenship and they can change their names on the passport when they become citizens. So we're allowing terrorists to put themselves in their own witness protection program. And finally, this says this, and I want you to listen carefully. In many cases, the act of filing for an immigration benefit sufficed to permit the alien to remain in the country until the petition was adjudicated. Terrorists were free to conduct surveillance, coordinate operations, obtain and receive funding, go to school and learn English, make contacts in the United States, acquire necessary materials, and execute an attack. Is there any ambiguity to that statement? Finally, there have been so many hearings held. I've been before, I think the number is 17. I've lost count. I wish they had listenings instead of hearings. I don't think anybody listens anymore. And I was called, by the way, by Sheila Jackson Lee and other Democrats. If you folks remember, when 2 dead terrorists got permission to go to flight school 6 months after 9/11, Sheila Jackson Lee and Jim Sensenbrenner asked me to come down and testify to try to figure out how we could screw up that badly. That hearing is still part of the permanent library over at C-SPAN. But in any event, there was a hearing, and this was on April 17th, 2018, conducted by the House Intelligence Subcommittee, Counterterrorism and Intelligence Subcommittee, on the topic of Iranians operating in terrorist organizations in the around the world, rather. So here is what one of the expert witnesses had to say, and I want you to listen carefully to this. When you look at the caravans massing on our borders, and they're coming into the country, I want you to think about this, because I'm going to be honest. I haven't had a night's sleep where I haven't been awakened in the middle of the night thinking about this statement. It's that bad. In recent years, Hezbollah's Latin American networks have also increasingly cooperated with violent drug cartels and criminal syndicates, often with the assistance of local corrupt political elites. Now, think about that. We think of Hezbollah as Middle East. There are tens of thousands of members of Hezbollah, the Quds forces, probably ISIS and Al-Qaeda operating throughout Latin America right now. They've been here for years. They're here, okay, in our hemisphere. So all that separates us from them is the Mexican border that nobody seems to want to secure except Trump. For the record, by the way, the wall doesn't stop anyone from entering. That's another lie. If the goal was to stop people from entering, he would have blocked off the ports of entry. He didn't. All that the border wall does is funnel everybody and all cargo through ports of entry so they can be screened, vetted, and recorded. It's kind of like the velvet rope at the bank that guides customers to the next teller, or when you go to the airport, those cattle runs that guide the passengers to the next available TSA agent. That's what the wall was for, not to stop people, but to funnel people so that there's integrity to the process. Who could be against that? Chuck Schumer proposed a 5-year felony under federal law for anybody who trespasses on critical infrastructure or landmarks. But the same Schumer and his playmates say that when you trespass on America, you should be given citizenship. It's mind-boggling. So anyway, they say this. In recent years, Hezbollah's Latin American networks have also increasingly cooperated with violent drug cartels and criminal syndicates, often with the assistance of local corrupt political elites. Cooperation includes the laundering of drug money, arranging multi-ton shipments of cocaine to the United States and Europe, and directly distributing and selling illicit substances to distant markets. Proceeds from these activities finance Hezbollah's arms procurement, its terror activities overseas, its hold on Lebanon's political system, and its efforts both in Lebanon and overseas to keep Shia's communities loyal to its cause and complicit in its endeavors. And this now is the paragraph that gives me nightmares just about every night. Listen carefully. This toxic crime terror nexus, that is, Hezbollah operating with the human traffickers and the drug smugglers, often one and the same. This toxic crime terror nexus is fueling both the rising threat of global jihadism and the collapse of law and order across Latin America. that is helping to drive drugs and people northward to the United States. It is sustaining Hezbollah's growing financial needs. It is helping Iran and Hezbollah consolidate a local constituency in multiple countries across Latin America. It is thus facilitating their efforts to build safe havens for terrorists and a continent-wide terror infrastructure that they could use to strike US targets. How many terrorists does it take to destroy us? Think about the 19 who carried out 9/11 and killed many more people than we lost to the entire Japanese fleet at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and the death count continues to climb. Think about that. By the way, last year, Mexico got over $40 billion in remittances. So when people say, who's paying for the wall? If you could slow down the flow of workers coming here to work illegally and send money home, and drugs pouring across our border that kill tens of thousands and are linked to almost all of the violence and all of the transnational gangs, I think of a border wall the way I think of insulation on the house. Insulation pays for itself. How? It lowers your heating bills and makes it cheaper to use air conditioning in the summertime. The border wall is certainly insulation for America. Now I come to my question, and I wonder how many of you figured out the answer. Is the immigration system broken? Well, here's my version. It is absolutely not broken. It is the most effective and efficient system the United States government ever created in the history of this nation. If you think I'm crazy, I assure you I don't wear a straitjacket. The immigration system that's supposed to protect us, and if you have any questions, go to Title 8, United States Code, Section 1182. It enumerates the categories of aliens who are to be excluded. It begins with aliens with dangerous communicable diseases or mental illness, criminals, terrorists, spies, human rights violators, fugitives from justice, Nazis, war criminals, aliens who are previously deported, and aliens who, if they worked, would displace American workers. Not a word in that law deals with race, religion, or ethnicity. If it did, I couldn't have enforced those laws for 30 seconds, let alone 30 years. My family was devastated in the Holocaust. I'm Jewish. I was named for my mother's mother, who could not get out of Poland and died at the hands of the Nazi bastards. The immigration system has gone from a protection to a delivery system. It delivers an unlimited supply of cheap, exploitable labor, not just the illegals, but the high-tech visas. And I promise you, there's no exploitation, there's no compassion in exploitation, and there's certainly no compassion in taking jobs and the ability to support American families in our own country, resulting in homelessness. That's not compassionate. It delivers an unlimited supply of foreign tourists. That's why we still have a visa waiver program, thanks to the Chamber of Commerce. It delivers an unlimited supply of foreign students. There's over 8,000 schools authorized to bring in foreign students. And we've also educated our enemies. Where do you think China got the technology to build their military that they threaten us with? Where did they get the training to hack our computers? Right here in the good old US of A. And finally, and this is most critical, the immigration system delivers an unlimited supply of clients for immigration law firms. I had a major 30-minute argument with Bob Goodlatte when he chaired the House Judiciary Committee. Bob Goodlatte, supposedly a conservative Republican, is an immigration lawyer. Bob Goodlatte told me, because we got into this discussion about H-1B visas, my first wife tragically died at age 33 of cancer. She was a brilliant programmer, MBA in computer science, Phi Beta Kappa graduate, National Math Honor Society. Almost all the people who worked for her had comparable credentials, and they were Americans. And he told me how his son would love to bring in tens of thousands of brilliant Indians. And in fact, one of the women on his staff is from India. I don't care about that. We're Americans. But the point of the matter is, I said, why are you so fascinated and fixated on bringing in Indian programmers when Americans are losing their jobs? And in some cases, as we've seen Disney World, forced to train their less qualified replacements. I said, what are the Americans, chopped liver? He told me the meeting was over. I looked up Bob Goodlatte's son because I knew nothing about him, but he's got a big mouth and he's arrogant. Look up Bobby Goodlatte. His son, in his 30s, I believe, has made millions and millions of dollars. He got his start with Zuckerberg at Facebook. By the way, Bob Goodlatte, when you read his bio, made a ton of money in a multi-state law practice that specializes in, we have any guesses? H-1B visas. By the way, now that the Democrats are in charge of Congress, they've got the majority. Zoe Lofgren, who chairs the House Immigration Subcommittee, where I've testified at least 8 or 9 times, Zoe Lofgren is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. So there's a clear conflict of interest. They're feathering their nest by making certain that immigration law firms never want for clients. And Americans are getting the short end of that stick. The immigration system, again, I submit, is doing exactly what the elite, what the people at the top 1/10 of 1% want. It's their personal FedEx delivering exactly what they want. I'm happy to take your questions. By the way, thank you again for permitting me to address this group.
And thank you very much, Mr. Cutler. Your information is definitely very eye-opening and disturbing. And thank you for speaking today. Can you guys turn off your speakers for a minute? Just for a minute. Okay. So the first question comes from Peter Cutler. And his question is, I'm sorry, Peter Kelly, rather.
I thought I had a long lost relative for a second.
Okay, so Peter Kelly asks, what can we as citizens do to help influence the Biden immigration policies? And can the state of New York do anything to address immigrants who are criminals?
Well, you have to get immigration to come out and take them. And if they don't want to take them, you're all dressed up with nowhere to go. But remember, it's Governor Cuomo.
Sorry.
Referred to immigration agents as thugs. So the first thing you need to do is get rid of Governor Cuomo, which would be a great first step on so many levels. I mean, my goodness gracious, Andy Cuomo, what a gift to the world. So he's giving driver's licenses to people who are here illegally, blocking access. Now, I want you to understand what that means. If some inspector is sitting at a booth and plugs in a New York State license plate because the car is coming in from Mexico or Canada, they can't get the information. They have to submit a subpoena, and maybe in a week, 2 weeks, 8 weeks, who knows, we have to go for coffee. You might get the record, part of it. When you stop a car, it's one of the most dangerous things you can do. I can tell you, I've stopped cars, we've taken machine guns out of cars. They are flying blind. The Border Patrol and ICE agents are flying blind thanks to Cuomo, thanks to other thugs like him. I think they're looking to get agents killed. I don't think he gave a rat's tail about the people who died in the nursing homes, and he lied through his teeth. Andy, if you're listening, you're a liar, okay? You lie and then you lie some more. And so the lies you're telling cost people their lives, and they're discouraging people from going to the immigration agents and giving them the information. When you create sanctuary cities, immigrants don't need shielding from immigration agents any more than motorists who follow the law don't need shielding from the Department of Motor Vehicles. The DMV gives you your license. Immigration gives over 1 million aliens green cards every year, puts them on the path to citizenship. When I was an adjudicator, I was happy to approve applications. We're not the enemies of the immigrants. Cops are the enemies of drunk drivers. Sure, bank robbers, absolutely. Reckless drivers, sure. People that like to blow red lights, don't you want them off the street? That's what we're talking about. Do you know who really gets protected by Cuomo's sanctuary policies? And this was a question I only wish Donald Trump had asked Biden. Instead of, can you say law enforcement, he should have asked him, have you read the 9/11 Commission report? You know who's being protected? Crooked companies that hire illegal aliens, crooked lawyers that facilitate fraud, like that cretin that I was involved with prosecuting, who was arranging the marriages between the Chinese seamen and the Puerto Rican lesbian hookers, okay? They are also protecting the human traffickers, because the way you go after human traffickers, because I did this also, I did all these jobs, pardon me, you arrest someone who's here illegally. By the way, you want to help them? We can give them visas if they help us. Is there anything better than that? We could let them get their families here if they help us. We could do more for them than anybody. My friends at the FBI and DEA said, Mike, we have limitless amounts of money, but your ability as an immigration agent to help illegal aliens is the best and most convincing tool in our tool chest. They always wanted me to help them. That's how important immigration is to dismantling terrorist and criminal organizations. So guess who's being shielded? Drug traffickers, gangs, human traffickers, bad lawyers, bad employers. By the way, to bolster that point, to put a fine point on it, remember El Chapo Guzman, the most prolific and violent drug trafficker in Mexico? Where was he prosecuted, folks? In Brooklyn, New York, the Eastern District of New York. literally a stone's throw from Chuck Schumer's house. A stone's throw from Chuck Schumer's house. Why? Because Roosevelt Avenue was his. You want to have an eye-opening experience? Take your car, go for a drive down Roosevelt Avenue at night, because you will see money wire services by the dozens with big flashing signs. And what do the signs say? 24/7. How many people working in sweatshops are waking up at 3 in the morning to send money to their families back home? The people online have just consummated a drug deal. Why is it here? Because New York has sanctuary policies, even though we have the biggest, most sophisticated police department. People are dying. And meanwhile, all that drug money is filtering through real estate, Wall Street, and the banks. Think about that.
So now we have another question. Okay. Janet Spitelli has this question. In response to your recent article, aren't many immigrants are already receiving medical services at greatly reduced prices?
Yeah, they're getting medical care because we have a conundrum. Can you ignore aliens who are here with COVID when they might be spreading it? And if that's your concern, by the way, isn't it ironic that Cuomo and Biden want us to stop aliens from coming in from England, from Brazil, and South Africa because there's a new variant of the COVID-19 virus? So suddenly immigration's important. Oh, don't let them in, don't let them in. Except when they get to the border and run the border, we don't even know they're here. And you have to wonder why they're not concerned about other diseases. If you remember, about 2 years ago, there was a viral disease that mimicked polio that was affecting many children. The theory was, I'm not saying it happened for certain, but the theory was it came in as a tropical disease from Latin America. I remind you that Ellis Island that we hear so much about was actually a quarantine station. It was built on artificial land, and there was a small island, and when the subways were excavated, the materials from the excavation were used to build up Ellis Island because there was no catch and release. You couldn't get off the island unless you got on a boat run by the US government. So nobody could get to the mainland and spread a dangerous disease. Families were split up at Ellis Island. But when I tell that to the open borders lunatics, they get very upset with me. And by the way, something else we really need to address, and this is important when you have conversations. My position is not anti-immigrant, it's pro-enforcement. And you could turn on almost any television network, and if you talk about securing the border, not sealing it, but against unlawful entry, the way a homeowner looks through the peephole, and you talk about making certain that we don't bring in so many workers, that we displace Americans or lawful immigrants, and that we don't permit criminals here, you're branded anti-immigrant. The most likely victim of transnational criminals, and by the way, it's not just from Latin America. Let's be clear. On the wall of my office at home, I have an award from the government of Japan. I arrested many people wanted in Israel. One guy that I arrested was wanted for the murder of a Palestinian prostitute. We sent him home. He stood trial, was convicted, and got a lengthy jail sentence. Criminals are criminals. Human nature is human nature. The most anti-immigrant thing you can do is not protect the immigrant communities from criminal aliens and workers who displace them. But the media twists the words. This is all Orwellian. So you're pro-immigrant if you want anarchy, and you're anti-immigrant if you want a system that honors America's lengthy, proud tradition of being a country built by immigrants. I like to tell people, America was built by immigrants, but not trespassers. And for a bit of clarity, the difference between an immigrant and an illegal alien is comparable to the difference between a house guest and a burglar. So the accusations stick. People say to me, isn't that terrible? Didn't your family come here? Yes, my mother came here as a 13-year-old. She was able to get out of Poland. She came legally. Her father is a guy that I don't even want to talk about. I had nothing but anger towards him. He refused to care for her. She was here legally. So what did she do at the age of 13? I guess she had a lot of white privilege because she lived by herself in a rooming house and worked at a sweatshop making umbrellas for $3 a week. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the accusations. I'm tired of Orwellian newspeak. It's time we spoke the truth to one another. And when you speak to your friends, keep the personalities out of it. Just ask them about the issues. Do you think it's a great idea that we let gang members in? Do you think it's wonderful that people are coming here and overwhelming the medical systems and our schools? Do you think it's terrific that if Biden carries out what he says he's going to carry out, we could wind up with well over 100 million immigrant children? America could not survive. We would implode. This isn't a statement of racism, it's a statement of economics, folks.
Okay, another question also comes from Peter Kelly. Will the Biden plan impact cooperation between the federal law enforcement and local law enforcement with regards to the gang problem?
God only knows, but certainly between sanctuary cities and Biden's unwillingness to do what has to be done. Let me tell you one of the things we used to do, and I think Tommy might have done this too, but I don't know. I could see you, Tom, so you could shake your head yes or no, and I could see you there looking all kinds of handsome. We used to work with the cops and we would raid gambling houses in Chinatown. We would raid houses of prostitution. Now, the people we arrested weren't necessarily criminals, but if you were frequenting a gambling house or a house of prostitution and you were here illegally, we would deport you. What did that do? It discouraged people from going to those kinds of criminal enterprises. Biden has implemented a program, from what they've said, that nobody will make a single arrest without getting authorization from Washington. Could you imagine a cop on the beat having to call the police commissioner? Sir, we just stopped a guy going 100 miles an hour on the Belt Parkway. He has no license. Can I arrest him? Nope, throw him back. He's too small. Okay, never mind. Let him go. That's what he's doing to immigration. Please understand that the way you get cooperators and the way that you take places down is by arresting the people who interact with the bad guys. They face deportation or they can stay if they cooperate. It's obvious to me, and Mr. Biden, maybe you could answer this. Are you seeking to destroy America? Are you happy that people will die at the hands of gangbangers? Because it's not enough that you have gang tattoos. It's not enough that you were accused of crimes. You have to be convicted, and then they have to decide whether the crime was serious. Was it rape in the second degree, rape in the third degree? Was it statute? Gee, I don't know. I guess we can't deport rapists. And the answer is, well, if we deport them, that's not fair to the immigrants. Well, who do you think they're raping and attacking? And by the way, we used to arrest people working in factories. I got to give you a funny story because this otherwise, it's all doom and gloom. Sorry. But we would arrest people who came on tourist visas and got a job, even if their time didn't expire. I remember going to a gas station, and there was an allegation that there was a guy working at the gas station who came on a tourist visa and was working as a mechanic, and he just came a month earlier. So I go to the gas station. There's a guy under a car on a crawler, those little boards with those little wheels. He's under this car. I kick him in the boot. He rolls out from under the car. I'm there with my partner. He is covered head to foot in grease. It looked like someone dropped him into a vat of grease. His name is on the jumpsuit that he's wearing. And I said, hi, I'm with immigration. And do you know what he said to me before he said anything else? I don't work here. Think about that. Think about that. I guess he was looking for his contact lens. I don't work here. So I went into the office, took the guy's time card, took the guy's paperwork because the boss actually had him working on the books. I put handcuffs on him. We slid him, literally slid him, greasy as he was, into the back of my government car. He went before a judge. He was deported by the end of the week. Why? He stole a job. There was a gas station at the back of the airport. The employer always hired illegal aliens. So my partner and I, we worked 4 to midnights, would always go to that gas station at 10 o'clock at night. It was worth working into the morning hours. And we didn't get extra pay for that, by the way. It was a matter of principle. This is before hiring illegals was a crime. So we would call the owner up at 10 o'clock and say, well, we just arrested your 2 guys. They were from Pakistan or wherever. I said, you got 15 minutes to come down here or we're leaving the gas station unlocked because they don't have the keys. So the guy would come down, I kid you not, in his bathrobe. After we did it 6 times, he decided he had enough. The next time I went back, we had 2 kids from Harlem, believe it or not, working in the gas station, or maybe it was Bed-Stuy, forgive me, I think they were from Bed-Stuy, working their way through college by working at the gas station. So they were doing their studying while they pumped gas. And they thanked us because they had heard the story about these 2 crazy immigration agents who kept calling up their boss at 10 o'clock at night. So when we hear this nonsense about, well, we're not going to arrest someone unless they've really committed a serious crime, don't you think running our borders is a serious crime? Go to Chuck Schumer's website. It might still be up. He actually said they should put a 16-year-old kid who climbed the Trade Center under construction. He recommended putting that kid in jail for 5 years for trespass. If you're willing to put a 16-year-old airhead in jail for 5 years, Why shouldn't we be able to send people back to their home country if they violate our laws? You get one opportunity for a first impression. The Biden administration is telling law-abiding citizens, don't come to America. You have to be out of your mind. Do not get a visa. I mean, if you were waiting online in the rain to get into the movies and saw all the neighborhood thugs and hooligans sneaking in through the side door and getting the best seats in the house and then being served popcorn, why in the world would you wait online? So you're allowing in dangerous people. So who would be attracted to these policies? I'll tell you who. Fugitives from justice, terrorists, gangbangers, the worst of the worst want to come to a country where the guy who has a gun, an illegal gun, I might add, does whatever the hell he wants with impunity. We're turning America into the Wild West. Well, that's kind of California. Does that qualify as the Wild West?
Yes. Okay, another question that John has is,
Hi, John.
do you believe that drug cartels are using money to get politicians to assist in criminal aliens getting visas into the USA? And are U.S. consulates involved as well, in your opinion?
Do you believe the sun's going to rise tomorrow morning?
I hope so.
Okay, did I answer your question? Look.
Am I on camera?
No.
It's
No, I
not.
think you're off camera.
I'm still recording.
I think I
It's
think
mute, and it says start
Can you hear me
video.
okay?
Oh, no, no, no.
Can
You're
you
you're
hear me
not on.
okay?
See, it says videos off.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I think you should be able to hear me. Oh, darn it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
You can hear me,
Just say
yes?
mute.
Okay, so
Mute means.
it's believed that
they can't
China
hear us.
is also laundering the drug money for the cartels. China has a huge footprint in Latin America. They're also the source country for methamphetamine and fentanyl. Fentanyl is so deadly that a small dose, there was enough fentanyl found in an apartment in Queens last year or 2 years ago. They said that it could kill tens of millions. It's that lethal. So China is sending us fentanyl, China is sending us meth, and China is laundering the drug money. And now Biden wants to make sure that we cozy up to China again. I want someone to understand what a real impeachable offense looks like, because to me, these look like impeachable offenses, but what the hell do I know? I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
Wow. Okay, I think that's all our questions.
By the way, my article is at Front Page Magazine, frontpagemag.com. If you want to get, I can put you on my list. If you go through Janet, she can provide you with my email address. My website is michaelcutler.net. I want to be clear. I don't see illegal aliens who come out of desperation to be my enemy. I've arrested many of them. I felt bad for most of them. I remember one time breaking my leg chasing some guy across an onion field. A bunch of us fell into an irrigation ditch. Do you know they brought this guy over to my car in handcuffs because he wanted to apologize. He was an illegal from Mexico. And he looked at me, he said, "Sir, it's my fault you got hurt. If I didn't run, you wouldn't have been hurt. I hope you can accept my apology." He wasn't my enemy. He was doing what makes sense for him. The problem is the politicians are not doing what makes sense for America. I just want you to think about Abraham Lincoln, who very eloquently described the country of the people, by the people, and for the people. When Dwight Eisenhower saw that America was possibly falling behind when Sputnik was launched, I remember that. He said, we're going to teach American kids math and science. He didn't say we're going to call India up for their best and brightest. Any politician who tells you we need to import the world's best and brightest needs to be voted out of office. I don't care what party they're with. I don't care if they're with the Hopping Kangaroo Party, okay? The solution to America is to give Americans the tools to be successful, not to knife them by bringing in replacement workers so that the people that bribe the politicians get what they want. Let's call campaign contributions what they are. They're bribes. When I got a medal from the government of Japan, my bosses had to make a determination that the materials that it was made out of weren't worth more than $35. They settled on $30. I was happy. It sits in my bookcase behind me. If it was worth $40, they would have taken it from me and hung it on the wall at headquarters in Washington. If we can't take a police medal without concern that it would be seen as inappropriate, explain to me how the politicians are out there stuffing their pockets. And if you don't like the lobbyists, please understand something. The politicians who take the money from the lobbyists have become the lobbyists' employees. The lobbyist writes the check and the politicians are depositing the check. Is that not an employer-employee relationship? And when you look at the staffers who work for the members of Congress, they're offered jobs all the time if they can get Congressman so-and-so to vote a certain way on a particular bill, and then they get rewarded by a job on K Street for twice or three times the money they were earning. You want clean, inexhaustible energy in America? I've got the solution. Listen carefully. Attach generators to the revolving doors between K Street and the Congress. We'll never be short power. I promise you.
I do have another question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We're running a special, 2 for $1.
Okay, in your opinion, do you think it's legal for individual border states like Texas to build their own wall to protect themselves from illegal immigrants crossing?
I don't have the legal horsepower, but to my thinking, why not? You know, they're entitled to protect themselves. To me, it's a 10th Amendment right.
Yeah, I agree. And that was Scott Coleman's question. That was a good question, Scott.
Yeah, very
Okay,
good.
I have a question, and some people have asked this also. What can we as American citizens do to stop this administration from putting us in danger?
We've got to reach out to the politicians irrespective of party. If you go to my articles at, at Front Page Magazine, I've written elsewhere, send them the articles. Let me tell you something. I don't think anybody who's a Democrat is automatically a bad guy. I mean, you can tell he's a bad guy if his name is Schumer or Pelosi, the ice cream queen. By the way, I have to tell you, if you want to talk about sociopathic conduct, to stand in front of a $25,000 freezer with designer ice cream on a night when Americans didn't know if they'd be able to feed their children, that was so off the rails. I don't care if she's a billionaire. People are hungry and scared. There's a synagogue a block from my house. And do you know every day there's a line of cars that stretches a half mile of people waiting patiently in line for food? Think about that image. We need to get to the politicians and say to them, listen, this is an existential threat. If you bring in 100 million people, America will turn into Venezuela overnight. Gangs will be out of control. The economy is going to crash. It's not sustainable. Venezuela had been the wealthiest country and most desirable country in Latin America. My sister-in-law from my first wife, her brother's wife, was from Venezuela. It turned into a disaster because of communism and because of bad economic planning. When people keep saying 11 million, you need to correct them and say, no, this is what it really looks like. Now, I can't get the mainstream media to cover this. David Webb had me on his program to talk about it. After 9/11, I was averaging between 30 and 40 television interviews per month on all the networks, MSNBC, Fox, CNN. I was a regular on Lou Dobbs when he was at CNN, sometimes twice a week. And when I wasn't on, his producers were calling me for advice on how to do their stories. All of a sudden, when the Chamber of Commerce said, we have a crisis on the border, I actually testified at a hearing where one of the witnesses was involved with an organization that was allied with the Chamber of Commerce. He came up to me. There was a recess so the members of Congress could vote. He walked up to me, very worked up. He said, Mr. Cutler, you've got to stop this BS about border security. It's got to end, and it's got to end today. You need to shut your mouth. And I just looked at him. I said, who do you think you're talking to? What's that about? That damn border is costing me a fortune. You are an impediment to my wealth and the wealth of my friends. I said, that wall is our first and last line of defense. By the way, another question, how many border states do we have? It's not 4, folks, it's 50. Any state that has an international airport lies on the northern or southern border or along our coastline are all border states. I said, but do you understand this is our first and last line of defense? He said to me, do you understand that it's inevitable that people die? Get over it. He actually said that to me in private at this hearing. And I looked him in the eye. I said, I have a prayer for you. He said, what's that? I said, I pray that if God forbid we get attacked, that they don't hurt a hair on your head. He said, "You're kind." I said, "No, I'm more evil than you could imagine. I hope you survive so you can watch your family get vaporized inches from your nose." And he looked at
Wow.
me, he said, "You want to step outside?" I said, "Let's do it." And he immediately threw himself in his seat. What kind of an animal at a hearing on national security can try to intimidate me into ending my calls to protect our borders, to protect our citizens? That's the evil that is bribing and buying the politicians, folks. It's very simple. What rational person, when I responded and said, "That's our first line of defense," said to me, "Death is inevitable. People are going to die. Get over it." That's who has bought this government, lock, stock, and barrel. And we need to stand up and say, this is enough. We need to engage our neighbors in conversations. Understand that they are invested in their political positions. I'm not one of those guys who think Donald Trump could do no wrong. I have a very good friend who's retired two-star general. The joke I have about him, and I won't mention his name, I love the guy like a brother, but I'm convinced if Donald Trump walked into his house and relieved himself on his table, he'd call it a centerpiece. I'm not one of those, but I certainly voted for Donald Trump, and I voted for him both times. But my God, if he had only articulated what he was doing more clearly and convincingly, he had a golden opportunity to ask Biden, yes or no, did you read the 9/11 Commission report? Yes or no, do you not understand that a massive amnesty program violates the findings and recommendations of the 9/11 Commission? Do you understand that you're going to destroy jobs and wages for Americans? That you're going to wind up with gangbangers coming into our country and killing people, mostly in the immigrant communities, ironically? Those were the questions I only wished. I was going to teach debate on the college level when I had the opportunity to become an agent. I was undefeated in high school, college. I used to argue bail for the US attorneys I worked with because nobody got bail. Focus on the issue. Only Americans have an inherent right to come to our country. Foreign visitors do not have an inherent right. I don't have an inherent right to walk through the front door of your house, nor do you have an inherent right to walk through my front door. Immigration laws and national sovereignty are not racist. They're layers of protection. I want to know what nitwit would order, if it was Captain Kirk, order shields down at a time that we are in such peril. This is an act of national suicide. It's nothing less than that. And I truly believe that if you explain it that way, it becomes a very different conversation. What do you think of that?
Well, I think you are a very smart person, and thank you so much for speaking today. You're certainly one of the best speakers we've had. And the information that you provided us was very informative, and it gives us a lot to think about. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. And I could definitely say with confidence that we definitely would like you to come back to meetings because we all learned a lot today. And thank you so much.
My pleasure, my privilege. And I want to thank all of you for your activism. You know, I always like to make the point that democracy is not a spectator sport. You certainly demonstrated.
Well, thank you once again, sir. And hopefully one day soon we could all meet you in person because we certainly would like you to.
Oh, by the way, I got to put in one more plug. I do an internet radio program on Blog Talk Radio, the Michael Cutler Hour. It's on Friday nights from 7 until 8 p.m. And if you go to the Michael Cutler Hour, you can click on the links and you could listen to all of the podcasts. I do an hour where I do a review of the previous week's insanity. And I got to tell you, there's no shortage of insanity. So please check that out. And my own website is michaelcutler.net. But again, I think.
Okay, so if we go to michaelcutler.net, we could get the information on how to join your podcast. And
it should be there. Somebody help me out putting out this. I'm not all that. I'm kind of a techno dinosaur. But
Sure.
If you go to Google and just punch in the Michael Cutler Hour, it will take you to a Blog Talk Radio. I think it's linked at my website also. It's a good question. I have to check now. But
anything else that you want to promote? Any books or anything?
No, I wish I had a book. You'd be amazed at how difficult it is to get a book out there. But again, if you know of any other speaking opportunities, let me know. I have children. I have grandchildren. There's nothing about racism or bigotry in protecting our country from bad guys. I mean, it's just that simple. It's not from one part of the world. Human nature is human nature. We all bleed red when we're cut, right? And in every race, every religion, every ethnicity, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the human condition, isn't it? So this isn't about sealing the borders and xenophobia. By the way, would you believe it if I tell you that the late Arlen Specter, when I testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that people that have Mr. Cutler's position apparently suffer, or something to that effect, of exophobia. I almost broke out laughing, thinking, my God, the guy must think I'm afraid of the letter X. And then he corrected himself.
Wow.
This isn't about exophobia or xenophobia. It's about common sense, protecting ourselves. When the police tell you that there are burglars and home invaders out there, we lock our doors and may go to the store to buy better locks. Why in the world can't we do that for America?
I agree 100%. And once again, Mr. Cutler, thank you very much. And we'll definitely be in touch with you in the future, and have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Stay
Thank
well,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
And now we'll turn the over back to our president. Take it away, Janet.
Take it away. Okay, well, thank you so much. I also want to thank you, Mr. Cutler, for all of the information that you provided us tonight. It's a lot to digest. I know in preparation for tonight, I read some of his articles, and please, all you got to do is plug his name in. Very easy, comes up with a lot of interesting information, a lot of sites, a lot of history, and we're learning about how we can help change this shift in immigration policies by becoming more involved and by asking the hard questions and by getting in their face, just like Mr. Cutler is doing. And we really appreciate people like you who really care and really want this country to succeed, to continue to thrive, and we need it. So we're fighting the good fight. That's what that's actually my conclusion. Anyway, before I close the meeting, I have to get someone from our audience to make a motion to dispense with the reading of the treasurer's minutes and the minutes from the last meeting and our regular business, because in remote meetings like this, we don't usually do that. So who can make a motion for me? Okay, Mr. Kelly makes a motion, and who will second? I have Mr. Lennox seconding. Unfortunately, I do not have a date for next month's meeting, but we will definitely be meeting probably virtually again, unless of course things change. But we will have a March meeting. We have several speakers in line to speak, and we will soon be making that decision and finding an amazing speaker for you for next month. Hey, just like I said last month, Steve Levy can be reached. I've gotten his book. I found it very interesting. Mr. Cutler has a lot of stuff out there. Please continue the conversation and the open dialogue with him. Encourage your friends. As Mr. Gavia has said, we've recorded this meeting. We will be playing it again on Facebook. So anyone that missed it tonight can certainly join in the future and listen to it. And I thank you all for attending. I wish you all a good night. Until next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
So on, everybody. Bye.
Okay.